Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again, especially and particularly on this King holiday. Delighted to have you hanging out with us for the next 3 hours. I can assure you that we've got some great conversations for you today. Let me tell you all about it in a moment. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavissmileyshow.com. That's thetavissmileyshow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today in our second hour on this very special MLK holiday edition of Tavis Smiley. Professor Michael Honey, American historian and Guggenheim Fellow, and Bill Fletcher Jr., author, longtime trade unionist, and former head of Trans-Africa Forum, take us on a deep dive into the lesser-known chapter of Dr. King's legacy, his championing of workers' rights, and his vision for economic justice alongside racial equality. I've said many times on this program of late that, to my mind, the person of the year for last year, 2023, we're past that now. We're off and running in this new year. But I said a few times that I thought the person of the year last year should not have been Taylor Swift, not hating, but it should have been labor. The labor movement had quite the year last year, and I would have loved to have seen labor honored on the cover of Time as the person of the year. And we'll spend some time in our second hour today talking about Dr. King and labor, Dr. King and his championing again of workers' rights, and the timing of that conversation could not be more propitious. I look forward to being joined by Professor Honey and Bill Fletcher today in our second hour. In our third hour today, we will reprise our conversation with USC Professor Hajar Yazdia about how right-wing movements have manipulated the legacy of Dr. King. Her book is called The Struggle for the People's King, and the text helps us, I think, to better understand the interplay between history, politics, and race. It was an amazing conversation that we had with Professor Yazdia not too long ago on this program, and I want to reprise that hour. It was just that good, just that delicious. We'll reprise it today in our third hour. But in this first hour today, an MLK holiday conversation with renowned scholar and independent candidate for President of the United States, Dr. Cornel West. Doc was in town just a couple of days ago, and we sat down for an hour-long conversation about his thoughts on this annual King holiday. And it turns out he was leaving L.A. to head to Washington. There was a huge rally a few days ago over the weekend in Washington, a Free Palestine rally, and Dr. West did something that only Dr. West can do. He weaved King and Israel and Hamas and this war in real time. He weaved King and that war together in a way that only Cornel West can do. I'm going to play some of his speech at the rally at the top of the second hour. So before I get to Honey and Fletcher at the top of hour two, we'll play some of Dr. West's words from this powerful presentation last weekend at this rally in Washington, weaving King and what's happening in the Middle East. For now, though, let's commence our conversation with Dr. Cornel West. Dr. West, always a blessing to see you, my friend.
Brother, it's always more than a joy and blessing. I don't have a language. We have such a good time together,
we
man.
Do indeed. We do indeed. Happy King Day to you, first of all.
Well, I tell you, say his name, man. You won't just be silent for a while. We say hush for a bit. You know what I mean? He loved us so much, man.
Yeah.
He willing to live and die for us, though. You know, it's it's something, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
What do you make? You and I were just talking a few days ago about a book that we know is coming out later this year. It's taking a critical look at the ways in which King was so empathetic. And the author of this book, we shall see, but the author of the book, a professor at Tufts, is making the argument that King's depression, his anxiety, which we know was real.
Absolutely.
You can't be under that kind of pressure and not have, some anxiety. We know the autopsy taken after his death. You know the story better than I do.
Oh, yes.
39 years old when he's assassinated, but had the insides of a 65-year-old man.
65-year-old man.
So we know the pressure from the outside showed up on the inside. But this professor is going to argue, I'm told in this text, and I've seen some of the manuscript in advance, that it was King's depression and his anxiety in some ways that made him so empathetic toward the suffering of everyday people, as you might put it. What do you make of the radical ways in which King was so empathetic about the suffering of people around the world?
I think it has so much to do with Alberta, his mama, and Daddy King, his father, and Ebenezer Baptist Church that shaped him. And he really seriously wanted to be a follower of Jesus. He really did. And of course he had his faults and foibles, but he believed that at the deepest level of his heart, mind, soul, and body. And when you have that kind of care and concern, that kind of hypersensitivity, you're going to have some serious depression, man. You're going to have some burdens because you got to pay some costs, and you're going to have all the lies coming at you, misunderstood, misconstrued, trashed, degraded, and demeaned, and yet he still kept coming. And as he would say over and over again, I'd rather be dead than afraid.
That's right.
Rather be dead. He'd rather die for his cause and his calling than be afraid. You see, that's deep. It reminds me of John Coltrane. You know what Naeem and them used to say about Train, when he was so hypersensitive to other people's suffering that he ended up getting locked into addiction for a little while, man, because the world's just too cold and cruel. And when he bounces back, that love supreme. See, King was in so many ways the embodiment, the enactment of Coltrane's love supreme.
I talk about this in my text, Death of a King. Spent some time with Clarence Jones and Andy Young and Jesse and all the others who were in that inner circle, who I spoke to for my book, including Coretta Scott King, the widow. And so they knew that King was battling anxiety from time to time and depression. You can't help, to your point, but experience that when you're operating at his level.
Absolutely.
And yet they also knew that if J. Edgar Hoover ever found out that there were even conversations about King seeing a therapist, that Hoover would use that against him in the worst ways. Every time I think about that, my heart just kind of flutters and fluctuates about the fact that Martin was going through all that drama and didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. I mean, it's one thing to take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there, as the song says.
Oh, yeah.
It's another thing in real time to not have someone to talk to about what you are going through. When we come forward with our guest, Dr. Cornel West, independent candidate for president, we will talk, of course, about his campaign in this hour on this King holiday, but we'll get his take on the box that Martin was in, as it were, navigating the anxiety, the pressure he was under, and yet not having any release, any outlet, anyone to talk to about it, for fear that if Hoover found out, he'd use it against him. You're listening to Dr. Cornel West, and I'm glad about it, on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
Jim Gaffigan here with some more Straight Talk. Now you can get a Walmart Plus membership, plus not pay for it, because it's included with Straight Talk wireless plans. You get free delivery with Walmart plus a Paramount Plus subscription included. Plus, you pay less for gas. That's a lot of pluses.
Only Straight Talk gives you unlimited 5G data and Walmart Plus included on select plans for free.
Straight Talk Wireless, available at Walmart.
Requires service on Gold or Platinum Unlimited. One offer per eligible account. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. Additional terms apply.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right. Yeah. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency, all over Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face when it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah. Breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Oh, this cold.
Honey?
Honey?
Honey, you need DayQuil Severe Honey.
DayQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a honeylicious taste, because life doesn't stop for a cold.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
No, I'm getting a cold.
Honey.
Try DayQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu relief. DayQuil Severe with honey flavor. The daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, honeylicious, power through your day medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
I'm Tavis Smiley. He is Dr. Cornel West, independent candidate for president of these United States. We'll get to that a little bit later in this conversation, but we are celebrating the life and legacy of one Martin Luther King Jr. here on the King holiday. I can't think of anyone I'd rather be spending this hour with than my friend Dr. Cornel West, talking about, again, the person that we both regard as the greatest American this country has ever produced, Martin Luther King Jr. I think we agree on that, do we not?
Oh, no doubt about that. Yeah. Now, of course, Irene B. West.
Your mama and your daddy.
Right alongside him. And Mama.
And I ain't mad about it. I ain't mad about that.
I hear you.
We were talking a moment ago about the particular part of my text, and others have talked about this, but I wrote about this in Death of a King, that there were folk in King's inner circle, certainly near the end of his life, who knew he needed help. There were conversations amongst his inner circle about getting him access to a therapist, just someone to talk to, because they knew the burdens, the pressures were so immense that he was struggling with and trying to navigate through every day. And yet they knew that if whoever found out, J. Edgar Hoover found out, that Martin was seeing a therapist back in that period especially. We're still just now making progress on Black mental health and having some real earnest conversations about it. But back then, right, they would have tarred and feathered him with that information. What's your read on that?
Well, I mean, we know that Harry Belafonte's psychoanalyst was going directly to the FBI. The FBI would use anything. I mean, the reality is that whether he went to the psychologist or anybody else, the FBI is going to use every form of weaponry they can in trying to crush our brother, and yet he still stood tall till the end. But you're absolutely right. But, you wonder, the conversation he'd have with Brother Ralph Abernathy, Coretta, his wife, Dorothy Carton, close friend, some of the others, whether he could share a little bit of the burden. Now, I've heard, and you tell me what you think on this, that some days he just couldn't get out of bed, and he'd have to listen to Mahalia Jackson sing on the telephone. Probably Little Precious Lord, written by Thomas Dorsey, when his baby and his wife died the same day, and he moves to Pilgrim Baptist Church under the Reverend J.C. Austin dancing preacher, one of the greatest preachers. She's right there for Martin all the time. So you can see how the music was like medicine. And therefore, music has always been constitutive of we black folk and others, but especially we black folk. And we should never view music as external or ornamental or decorative. It's really at the core of so much of who we are. And Martin used that music as a kind of a medicinal element. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And you recall one of the last things he spoke of on that balcony at the Lorraine Motel. He comes out to the balcony, and Jesse is down in the parking lot with Ben Branch, great musician in Memphis. And Jesse looks up and says, "Doc, you remember Ben Branch?" He said, "Of course I remember Brother Ben." He said, "He's going to be at the service tonight. He'll be at the service tonight." And he said, "Brother Ben, I want you to play my song for me." He said, "And play it real pretty.
Play it real pretty.
Precious Lord, take my hand." That was his last request, to your point about the music. And moments later, the shots rang out, and Martin didn't make it to dinner at
Thomas Cowell.
Yeah, exactly. Cowell's home, Billy Cowell's. Yeah.
Oh, Billy.
That's right, Billy
That's
Cowell's,
right,
yeah.
Billy Cowell.
He didn't make it to dinner at Cowell's home that night, much less to the service that he thought he was going to later, where he requested Ben Branch to play that song. So no, that the music, to your point, was central to his life.
Oh, yeah. That's true for black folk.
His witness. Yeah.
You think of the level of terror and trauma and hatred coming at us for 400 years, man. That our music has been probably the fundamental form of artistic weaponry. That's why the black musical tradition is the greatest tradition in the 20th century when it comes to artistic creativity, spiritual fortitude, and moral courage. And Martin's preaching itself, and there's a wonderful new book out, Martin's Vibrato.
Love that. I had his brother on this program.
Is that right?
I had him on.
He did a wonderful job, didn't he?
And an amazing conversation.
Oh,
about
I
that
want to
book.
go back there. I got that.
Yeah, if you missed that conversation,
I read the book.
Martin's Vibrato.
Yes,
go to my platforms, check out the podcast. You'll find it.
But his preaching itself was a form of musicality.
Amazing conversation about that, brother. Speaking of music, and you mentioned his mother earlier, and I think, matter of fact, I was in conversation with somebody not long ago about this, and this came up, and they didn't realize this. We spend so much time, of course, as we should, talking about Dr. King, and you make the point more brilliantly than anybody. I quote you all the time. When people talk about King, sometimes the iconography gets in the way. The iconography of King gets in the way. You can't really see him for who he is, much less, as you know, the radical King. Right. Because the iconography just gets in the way, and as you so brilliantly put it, we are witnessing in real time the Santa Clausification of Martin King. That's Cornel West. Westian to the core, the Santa Clausification of Martin King. I'll let Doc unpack what he means by that. If you've never heard me reference it on this program, you probably have. He's here. He can explain for himself what he means by Santa Clausification in a moment. But I was talking to somebody the other day about his mother. You mentioned Alberta.
Oh, yes.
We spend so much time talking about his murder and his death and his life and legacy. People forget, speaking of music, his mama was sitting at the organ.
That's right, brother. In the church.
In the church. When they came in and shot and killed her.
Shot and killed her in the church, man.
Yeah, of course, years after Martin's death. But that story almost gets lost, what they did to his, you mentioned your precious mother and your precious father and what they mean to you. Can you imagine years after Martin's assassination, they walk in and kill his mama sitting at the organ at Ebenezer Baptist Church?
And the cross that we must bear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's... You remember Martin in the paddy wagon for 4.5 hours in the dark with the German shepherd going from Atlanta to Reidsville.
That's right.
Prison. And Daddy King told us that when Martin got out, he could hardly walk a straight line. All he could say was, "This is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people." You see, that's a love warrior at the deepest level. I mean, one of the saddest things about Martin King in so many ways is that everybody want to get at him. This is what it is to have spiritual greatness in our midst. Everybody want to get at him. And what did Martin say in that speech 1 year before he died at Riverside? He said, "Nobody's really, for the most part, understood."
That's right.
Who I was, what my calling was, what I was here to do, that I was trying to follow a Palestinian Jew named Jesus and be a Christian pastor and try to love my crooked neighbor with my crooked heart and be willing to not just talk about the cross, not just bear the cross, but die on the cross. And so when they look at him, some people see a political activist. Yes, that's a crucial dimension. Other people see a great preacher. Yes, that's one dimension. But at the center and the core of who he was his calling and his cause. Everybody these days want to connect his calling to somebody else's career and want to connect his cause to somebody else's brand. And these days, everybody got a career. Everybody got a brand.
I got a brand, yeah.
But Martin had a calling and a cause. That's a whole different thing, man. And he's not the only one. Fannie Lou Hamer's the same way. Ida B. Wells the same way.
For those who've not heard your formulation, which I referenced earlier, about what we are witnessing in real time, the Santa Clausification of Martin King, by that you mean what exactly?
Yeah, I first used that Nelson Mandela when I gave the Mandela election in South Africa in 2006, and he was right there too. It's difficult to talk about that in front. I said South Africa is trying to Santa Clausify my dear brother Nelson Mandela, somebody who's got this deep love, courage, vision, willingness to fight, determined to go to the end, and you turn him into a nice little man with a smile that got toys in the bag, and everybody who comes see him, he hand out toys, and everybody got a smile because everybody loving him when they've already sanitized it. Well, Martin's the same way. You know, when Martin was alive at the end of his life, 72% of Americans disapprove.
That's right.
1 out of 2 black folk disapprove, and he came out against the war in Vietnam, tried to organize poor people across the board the way William Barber and Sister Theodore's is trying to do. You say, how could somebody disapprove of Martin? Because his courage and his love was a threat. I was blessed to write a song with the great Bootsy Collins.
I remember this.
Oh, right there in the studio.
When love is a threat.
When love. Now, Bootsy came up with the formulation. His genius is beyond description.
Yeah.
But I said, Bootsy, that reminds me of Martin. He said, I understand.
Yeah.
When love is a threat, because deep love is always a threat, because it's just so overwhelming. So overwhelming.
What, to your point now, what do you make of the ways that over the years we have started to rethink Martin? And I can see how that cuts a number of different ways. Right. There are ways in which people are rethinking him because as these FBI files come out with all this mess in it, most of which you can't believe anyway, because you got to consider the source, as we say. But as these files come out, people rethink him in terms of the things being said about him. You and I were talking, I think, at dinner not long ago about David Garrow,
right.
One of the scholars who've written so much about Dr. King, and this ugly story that came out about what happened in a hotel room in D.C. and whether Martin watched somebody getting raped. I mean, that kind of nonsense comes out, and it makes people start to rethink his legacy on the one hand. On the other hand, I can see ways in which, I think you probably can too, ways in which movements, and if not movements, because I know your formulation, momentum, and movement. Movements are rare, as you often say. It starts with a moment. We build momentum, and maybe movement breaks out, but not usually. They're very rare. But I can see ways in which there are certainly organizations, institutions, and individuals who are yet inspired by Martin in ways that are allowing them to engage their work in witness. For example, there are folk, including the work we're doing in L.A., who are linking social justice and climate justice.
Beautiful.
So people are being inspired by Martin in so many ways. Anyway, my question is, what do you make of the ways in which, for good or for not so good, people are rethinking, reframing Martin all these years later?
No, I think it just shows his profound relevance and pertinence, though. I think of the book by Brother Brandon Terry and Thomas Shelby's, that wonderful, what's it called, to Make a New World. Is that the name of it? A collection of essays on Martin Luther King Jr.'s political philosophy. That the depth, the range, the unbelievable profundity of Martin's work that's connect to a variety of issues. You think, for example, when you talked about militarism, he wasn't just talking about war. The U.S. military is the number one contributor to the ecological crisis with levels of carbon dioxide and carbon footprints across the board. Unbelievable. 800 military units around the world, special operations in 100 countries. Militarism and ecological crisis go hand in hand. Talked about racism, talked about poverty, talked about materialism too. Martin, we never get to the depth of what you were giving us, your love.
You mentioned militarism. That is obviously part of that trifecta that he often spoke of, the triple threat, as he put it, facing our nation: militarism, racism, and poverty. Yes. Militarism, racism, poverty. Those are the three threats that Martin spoke of often, that our nation was facing then and, frankly, facing now. When we come forward, I want to ask Dr. West about racism, militarism, and poverty. And if you were grading American politicians on a Kingian scorecard.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
You hear the response already. Oh, Lord have mercy. I want to hear more about that. What happens to American politicians from the White House on down, on either party, in either party, both parties, if you're grading them, grading their performance on a Kingian scorecard? What have you done on racism, poverty, and militarism? It's the King holiday, but we're going to get funky when we come forward in addressing that question. You're listening to Dr. Cornel West on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found BenefitsCheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. BenefitsCheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
We thank you for sharing a part of your MLK Day with us here on the Black Information Network. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest. President Biden says he still has confidence in Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin after controversy surrounding his recent hospitalization. Earlier this month, Austin was in the hospital for 3 days before the White House was notified. Biden said he was still confident in Austin, but also said it was a lapse in judgment not to inform the White House sooner. Electric vehicles are getting a bit more affordable. That's thanks in large part to Hertz, the rental car company that's selling a lot of its EV inventory. That includes high-mileage Tesla Model 3 starting at around $20,000. The Chevy Volt EUV is also selling on the Hertz website, starting at around $22,500. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
For victims of drunk and drug driving, our grief is unique. But you are not alone. You always have a place at MAD. Call our 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A very busy sports Sunday. We start with the Rams. Impressive performance at Detroit, but they lose by 1. The Rams finished the season at 10-8. Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua set an NFL record for most receiving yards for a rookie. 181 yards on 9 catches and 1 touchdown. The Chargers are in the news. They will be the first NFL team to interview Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh for their head coach position. The two sides are getting together in the next couple of days. The Clippers lose by 4 at Minnesota, 26 26 points for Kawhi Leonard. USC's women's basketball team handed UCLA their first loss of the season. The second-ranked Bruins lost by 8 in front of a sellout crowd at Galen Center. They were 14-0. USC freshman guard Juju Watkins had a game-high 32 points. The 5th time this season, Watkins has scored 30 or more. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're all set with your Medicare prescriptions, Mrs. Brown.
This is not just low-cost copays at Walgreens.
I can actually help you set up 90-day refills if you want.
This is having a partner you can trust. Get low-cost copays, 90-day refills, and delivery from your neighborhood Walgreens. This is being independent. Together. Walgreens.
Restrictions apply. For details, see walgreens.com/pharmacy.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Skincare is self-care, and with daily beauty steals of 50% off during Ulta Beauty's Love Your Skin event, I can find everything I need to make loving my skin a daily practice, from brands like Osea, Lancome, and Tula. And I can shop weekly skin and wellness deals of 30% off more must-have brands. Plus, see what's new from brands like Bubble and in select stores, Sol de Janeiro and Ulla Henriksen. Hurry, event ends January 20th. Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions apply.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm-fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties. Classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you with us today on this King holiday. Our guest in this hour is the one and only Dr. Cornel West, independent candidate for president. We'll get to that, I promise, before we wrap this conversation, how the campaign's going and how he sees this election season that is officially underway today. As I think about it, today is January 15th. Today is the Iowa caucus.
Oh, that's true.
And so the official start to this presidential campaign, which we've been dealing with for the last 2 years already anyway, it actually started the minute Trump finally left the White House. The campaign started all over because you knew he wanted to run again. So it's really a 3-year campaign already.
Isn't that the truth?
And some countries do this in 30 days. Perhaps we should. It's just too long.
And publicly financed,
exactly.
too, in other places.
Too
all
long,
this big money.
Too long a process. We'll get to that a little bit later.
Absolutely.
But the race for the White House officially begins today with the Iowa caucus. Before I get back to that question about grading politicians on the Kingian scorecard, what do you make of the irony that the campaign season begins today on King's birthday, but of all places, Iowa?
Iowa. No, I think it's more than irony, brother. It's more than irony. With King, you got the profound. With Iowa caucus, you got the pathetic.
Yeah.
Those are the opposites.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We'll leave that. We'll leave that right there.
King is sublime. They so superficial, and so much of the press will be talking about,
of course,
Iowa, and we talking about Martin.
You see my point?
See, we got the right focus. We got the right focus, man.
That's why we mentioned it briefly, and we're going to keep on moving and keep the focus on Martin.
That's right.
Martin is not going to get his respect today with the Iowa caucus.
Not in the corporate media.
Not in the corporate media, not today. But he will on this program.
That's right.
That said, so this triple threat that Dr. King spoke of all the time, racism, poverty, and militarism. If you were grading Joe Biden on down on a Kingian scorecard, it's hard to know who measures up. But what's your read on that, Doc?
Well, we can come out of blocks and acknowledge Trump just gets F across the board.
Across the board, yeah.
And that's a compliment. It'd be lower than zero. Yeah. But let's just look at each one of them. Mm-hmm. Militarism. Well, right now the budget for every dollar, 62 cents. Every dollar goes to the military. Mm-hmm. So King turns over in his grave. Mm-hmm. Biden supports genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid-like conditions in the West Bank and Gaza, Israeli occupation. He would be leading the charge, just like he did against the Vietnam War. He would be leading the charge on moral grounds. He wouldn't be hating no Jewish brothers and sisters. He wouldn't be hating any group. He'd be hating occupation, domination, oppression, exploitation. The very fact that we have not only a militarized budget, let alone militarized communities, police in schools and so forth and so on, but now genocide before our very eyes. You say Biden, Lord have mercy, D-. The only reason why he doesn't get an F is, that's a good reason. I hadn't really thought of
it. You still pondering that, huh?
Genocide is about as bad as you can get.
Yeah.
It really is. It's about as bad as you can get. Look at racism. Well, he's got some wonderful black faces in high places. I love my dear sister Jackson on the Supreme Court. She's brilliant. She speaks her mind and so forth. We got Austin and the others. Got to pray for him. I know he's sick right now, but he's been representing the American empire, enabling genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid too. Ought to be shamed. What's the sister's name at the United Nations?
Lisa.
What's our dear
I can see her face exactly.
I can see her face. God bless her. She's done the same thing as Austin.
That's a statement that we can't recall it, though.
No, I probably don't want to because she's a beautiful black woman aesthetically, but she's enabling the genocide too. Voting against ceasefire when over 10,000 children have been killed in just a matter of weeks. Please. What kind of people are we to even think that kind of action is permissible? I don't care who you work for. So Martin King would say D- when it comes to militarism. When it comes to racism, I said already it would be a D- for militarism. Racism would probably be about a C or C-. Mass incarceration still a crime against humanity. Biden himself was the architect of that bill and so forth. But by having some black representation, even though they're weak and feeble, it shows that his racism was not the kind of wholesale racism that you would get out of fascists like Trump. And then the third one is poverty. Well, I was just there in Skid Row with Pastor Q and the others. And the very fact that Skid Row and Skid Rows all across the country exist, nearly 40% of black children living in poverty and 25% of all children living in poverty, the richest nation in the history of the world. Martin would say, D. D. Now, under Biden, child poverty went down 50%. I was glad. I was breakdancing. But the bill expired. It doubled.
Yep.
Went right back again.
That's exactly right.
King turns over in his grave. So part of our task is, without being self-righteous, but being self-critical, but trying to make the world safe for the rich legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. as one of the great love warriors, freedom fighters, wounded healers, and joy spreaders of not just black folk, not just America, but of the world. He's a figure in world history in the same way. Great tradition of black people is world historical. And that's not just the musicians like Louis Armstrong and Sarah Vaughan and Luther Vandross and Barry White and the others, but as a people at our best. Now, at our worst, you know, we just as thuggish and gangster-like as anybody else at our worst.
Her name is Linda Thomas Greenfield.
Linda Thomas Greenfield.
Linda
I can
Thomas
see
Greenfield.
her beautiful face.
Yeah, I said Lisa.
That's what I can see, her beautiful face. But Lord, she's been an enabler too. And it's interesting how the U.S. government sends the black folk on the international stage to enable.
You recall, it was Colin Powell they trotted out.
Isn't that the truth?
To make the case for the Iraq War.
That's a good point.
And all the evidence was wrong, flat wrong.
Just lying.
Yeah.
Lying.
But they trumped out the late great Colin Powell to make that case. And so you to your point, you look at the ways in which oftentimes it's these black faces in high places that are leading the charge in directions that we ought not to be running. But to your point, you got Linda Thomas. I mean, you make a powerful point. Let's just pause for a second. You got Linda Thomas Greenfield, a sister at the UN, representing us in this situation. You already mentioned Lloyd Austin at the Defense Department leading us in this situation. There are others on that list, but it's a little painful.
And we can't get one black politician to call for ceasefire when over 10,000 precious babies have been murdered, been killed. Now, I believe every baby's precious. Israeli baby's precious. Jewish baby's precious, of course. Yes, Hamas should be doing that. But when you have 10,000 and counting on television and you veto a ceasefire, good God, how do you sleep at night? Yeah. Does your job mean that much? How do you look at your child? They probably went to Vacation Bible School and they heard the song, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious. In his sight, did that mean anything to you? You know what I mean? Good God, well, that's what Martin was concerned about.
Well, that's part of the problem, as you well know, that they don't equate the life of a Palestinian baby in the same way they do.
That's remind you, a black baby vis-a-vis a white baby in the history of American or an indigenous people's baby.
That is it.
In the history of vis-a-vis a white baby. But it's true. But that's one reason why on moral and spiritual grounds, we've got to be in solidarity with all oppressed peoples and all babies, no matter what color, who are being murdered and violated because they are innocent.
I think the takeaway from Dr. West's answer to that question about how do you grade American politicians these days on a Kenyan scorecard, most all of them are failing. I'll leave it there for now. When we come forward, we'll talk more expressly about his campaign for the White House. You're listening to Dr. Cornel West on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Skincare is self-care, and with daily beauty steals of 50% off during Ulta Beauty's Love Your Skin event, I can find everything I need to make loving my skin a daily practice, from brands like Osea, Lancome, and Tula. And I can shop weekly skin and wellness deals of 30% off more must-have brands. Plus, see what's new from brands like Bubble and in select stores, Sol de Janeiro and Ulla Henriksen. Hurry, event ends January 20th. Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions apply.
Oh, this cold.
Honey?
Honey?
Honey, you need DayQuil Severe Honey.
DayQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a honeylicious taste. Because life doesn't stop for a cold.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
No, I'm getting a cold.
Honey.
Try DayQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu relief. DayQuil Severe with honey flavor. The daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, honeylicious, power through your day medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Jackson Hewitt has a plan to get your tax refund fast. With a buck here, buck there. Here a buck, there a buck, everywhere a buck.
You don't have to wait weeks for your tax refund. Get money sooner with a no-fee refund advance loan at Jackson Hewitt.
On this loan, there's a money today guarantee. E-I-E-I-Do.
Don't settle for chicken feed. Get fast bucks at Jackson Hewitt today. No-fee refund advance loans by Republic Bank offered to eligible clients. Money today guarantee if approved for a loan on a prepaid card. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right. Yeah. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency, all over Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face when it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah. Breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Our guest, Dr. Cornel West, as we celebrate the annual MLK holiday. And while the rest of the country is talking about the Iowa caucuses, and those cannot be ignored in this official run-up to the White House, we want to give Martin his respect by spending an hour today in dialogue about his grand life and his rich legacy. Doc, let me just answer this question broadly, and I can narrow it as we move through the rest of this hour. But tell me how the campaign is going, good sir.
Oh, we on the move. We got a quartet. We got 4 magnificent managers, and dear Brother Edwin and Brother Anthony, Sister Madeline, Sister Kiana. 4 young, brilliant folk. We already got Alaska. We on the ballot. Yeah, we on the move with Utah. We on the move here in California. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it's one state at a time.
One state at a time. We should have about 15, 16 states by the 15th of March. We hope to have about 30 by early summer, and we're trying to get on all 50, but even if we get on about 45 or so, that would be magnificent. And all we're doing is just trying to keep alive the legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin and others, and all that means is what? Abolition of poverty, end mass incarceration, reparations as a matter of truth and justice, and making sure that the folk who have been enslaved and Jim Crowed have a legacy vis-a-vis their descendants, where they can be not just financially rewarded, but be acknowledged in terms of the vicious treatment that they underwent. I want to make sure that there's Medicare for all. I want free education. I can go on. And we're going to shut down Cancer Alley. We're going to shut down Cop City. We're going to make sure police are accountable. It's basically the raising of the voices, which is the Negro National Anthem, the Black National Anthem. We're going to lift every voice. And when you lift every voice, what happens? People don't choose to be poor. They don't choose to be abused. They don't choose to be subjugated. We got strong anti-patriarchal program in terms of both reproductive rights, but also women being able to have voices to shape their destiny. Domestic violence, zero in on all the different issues. When it comes to health care, the differential treatment of black women vis-a-vis white women, we got to make that a priority to make sure that we hit that head on. And of course, in the end, we just need a fundamental transformation in our economic system, brother. Yeah. We got 3 individuals with wealth will come to 160 million fellow citizens. 3 people. Now, that's spiritually sick. Deeply
That's
sick,
not sustainable.
Man. That's exactly right.
You cannot sustain. Not in a. I call this an experiment in democracy. We're not quite a democracy yet. We have a Madisonian framework for it, but we haven't quite perfected the democracy thing. So One could call it, as you have, an oligarchy, a plutocracy, but it is not a democracy. Again, the best I can do is call it an experiment in democracy. But those numbers are just not sustainable. We write about this in our book, The Rich and the Rest of Us.
Oh, yes.
When you talk about poverty, you got to talk about poverty and income inequality.
What year was that? 2007.
It's been a few years now.
Can you believe that?
But we link in that book 3 things: poverty, income inequality, and economic immobility. You got to discuss all 3 at the same time. But clearly, this gap between the have-nots and the have-gots, as we call it, the rich and the rest of us, that gap is not sustainable, and that's one of the issues that Dr. West is talking about perennially on the campaign trail. When we come forward in our remaining moments with him, I am curious as to whether or not he thought when he made the announcement he was going to run that the pushback would be so vicious. I mean, some of the pieces I've seen written about you, the comments I've seen about you from the Democratic Party and comments coming out of the White House, it's clear that on the one hand, they are somewhat afraid of you, but on the other hand, they ain't holding back. They coming out swinging to make sure that they destroy you to the extent they can. We'll talk about that on the King Holiday with the independent candidate for president, Dr. Cornel West, who you're listening to right now on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Our remaining moments now with Dr. Cornel West, independent candidate for president. Got about 3.5, 4 minutes here, Dr. West. I want to close on this note. I am curious as to whether or not, but you decided that you were going to announce your run for the White House, whether you thought the pushback from these systems and structures, namely from the Democratic Party, would be so vicious, so extreme.
Yeah, I think there is an arrogance and self-righteousness among leaders of the Democratic Party. They think that somehow they own not just black folk, but people across the board. Now, we know the fascism is real with Trump, and I believe we have to create an anti-fascist movement, anti-fascist alternative vision and different way of conceiving of how we go about engaging in politics. But if the Democratic Party says they want to save the soul, if Biden says he wants to preserve democracy, can't have democracy within the Democratic Party itself, no primaries, no debate whatsoever, and then viciously attack persons like myself and others, I say, oh, you are the ones who saving the soul of America? You are the ones who protecting democracy? You couldn't support the John Lewis bill enough to suspend the filibuster? You couldn't support the George Floyd bill enough to suspend the filibuster? Please, quit lying. Shame on you, Biden. Do you know what it means to talk about saving the soul of democracy? That is the very motto of Martin Luther King Jr., James Lawson, and others founding of SCLC. That's what they said. They were trying to save the soul of democracy. You're going to appropriate their language and then support genocide, have anti-democratic practices? That is as bad as Pat Boone trying to steal Bo Diddley and Curtis Mayfield's music and become millionaires, and yet they're the geniuses. I have no patience with that kind of way of being in the world. That's how I am and roll, my brother.
I'm wondering whether or not you think people, though, will fall for that, as we might put it, sounding brass and tinkling cymbal, whether or not they'll fall for that given the alternative on the other side of the table, namely Donald Trump.
And I understand. I mean, as I've noted, and you've reminded me so lovingly, though, brother, that it's a plausible argument. There's no doubt about it. Trump is a major threat. In the end, it's just not persuasive, because if all you're doing is reacting to Trump over and over and over again, then you end up being a parasite. Sooner or later, fascism will take over. Now, if America fundamentally just chooses to be a fascist nation, then we just have to choose to go down fighting. We're not going to accept it. But that's the history of black people for 200 and some years in America, right? You got, for the first 100 years, you got slaveholders running the country. So what you going to do when you go to the election? 1840s. What you going to do, Frederick Douglass? You choose between two slaveholders. No, he created the Liberty Party. Well, you got a chance of a snowball in hell with the Liberty Party. I know, but that's the kind of choice I'm making because I don't want to be complicitous with slave holding. I love my brothers and sisters who are enslaved. I'm not going to have no truncated compromise about their enslaved condition. That's where we are now. Trump, Civil War #2, Biden, World War III. That's the choice. Where we going to go? Somebody sang a song. Thank you, Mahalia, precious Lord. Take my hand.
And that is why he is Cordell West, independent candidate for president. Ain't nobody like him, and I celebrate that. He is one of a kind.
Love you, though, brother.
Love you back, man. Ain't nothing you can do about it. I just love you. Now you can return to all your Iowa caucus news, but at least you got an hour today celebrating the greatest American this country's ever produced on his holiday, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When we come forward, Michael Honey and Bill Fletcher Jr. in hour 2 talking about King championing the rights of workers after we hear audio of Dr. West at a major rally in D.C. over the weekend linking King and Palestine. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 50.